Something broke in the heart of the United Kingdom, and it wasn't a window nor a fence, but the patience of an entire people. According to reports already circulating through the corridors of Westminster, trust between Keir Starmer's government and ordinary Britons has simply unraveled. What began as a murmur of discontent has become a collective roar echoing across London. Tonight, thousands gather outside the gates of Downing Street, not waving party flags, but clutching energy bills, statements that tell stories of cold, of abandonment, of silent betrayal. And as the spotlights illuminate number 10, one phrase is repeated among the crowd. He promised to protect the people, but he protected the corporations. Something deep is stirring in the country. A feeling of revolt, contained for years. And now, at last, it has exploded. What is at stake goes beyond politics. It is the very moral contract that binds leader to people, and it is being torn apart, line by line, before the world's eyes. What is happening on the streets of London is not an ordinary protest. It is a collective cry from those who have nothing left to lose. According to sources close to the movement, the crowd has grown spontaneously, made up of exhausted workers, desperate mothers, pensioners who have seen dignity become a luxury. The images are chilling. Nurses still in uniform holding up folded energy bills, parents with children on their shoulders shouting, "Enough!" under the cold glow of Whitehall's streetlights. And inside, behind the closed windows of number 10, the government pretends nothing is happening. It pretends the people are exaggerating, that the pain is temporary, that the cold is psychological. But those on the streets know there is no more patience for speeches, no more trust in technical reports. There is only revolt, the silent revolt of a people called ignorant for daring to complain about what is killing them. The unbearable cost of living in a country that claims to be prosperous, yet leaves its own citizens freezing in their homes. According to reports circulating in the alternative press, the spark for this explosion was a series of broken promises. Starmer, in front of the cameras, pledged stability, protection for British workers, and courageous action against the cost of living crisis. But what the people saw was the opposite. Bills doubling, taxes rising, and foreign companies fattening on green subsidies paid for by the English taxpayer. The shock came when official documents revealed that billions of pounds had been funneled to offshore corporations, while families in Birmingham, Leeds, and Manchester rationed heating. The talk of a green transition turned into a bitter joke. Green transition for whom? Asked the protesters. For them, who live in heated mansions? The message was clear. The sacrifices are always made by the same people. And at this moment, outside the iron gates of power, British patience, famous for its calm, finally seems to have run out. According to sources close to the royal household, even Buckingham Palace is watching with growing concern. There are whispers that King Charles, a champion of balance and tradition, has expressed disappointment with the government's technocratic tone. The king, who has always spoken of environmental responsibility with humanity, is said to have confided to advisers that you cannot save a planet by destroying a people. This phrase, according to rumors, spread through the salons like wildfire and was received as a symbolic blow against Downing Street. Inside Parliament, ministers avoid comment, but the tension is palpable. Cameras have captured tense faces, rapid exchanges of messages, and a notable absence. Starmer has yet to appear in public since the revolt began. Some accuse him of cowardice, others of political calculation. But to those outside, the silence is deafening. Meanwhile, the chants grow louder, turning the London night into a chorus of indignation. We want to be heard. A cry that echoes from the common people to the crown. In the back rooms of Westminster, the crisis is already being described as an unprecedented collapse of trust. Labour MPs, according to leaks from journalists, have reportedly pressured Starmer to speak publicly, but the Prime Minister is said to be advised to wait for the dust to settle. A fatal mistake, say analysts, because this dust has turned into a storm. Social media is flooded with videos of blocked streets, chants, elderly people wrapped in blankets, and the faces of the political elite projected on screens with the words, "They are warm. We are not." It is the image of a country divided not by ideology, but by temperature. In pubs, train stations, and churches, the conversation is the same. How did we get here? And the answer always comes with anger and disbelief. We got here because we were deceived. The government spoke of collective sacrifice, but in practice, the sacrifice is individual and cruel. While power warms itself in palaces and offices, the people face the coldest winter in decades with empty promises and empty pockets. The most inflammable point of this crisis is not the cold. It is the humiliation. According to internal sources at the Department for Energy, the statements by Sarah Jones and David Walsh were the spark that ignited the revolt. Calling desperate citizens useful idiots and scientific illiterates was the snap that turned despair into fury. On the streets, this arrogance became fuel. A middle-aged man held a sign reading, "Useful idiot? I served in the army. I built this country." People see themselves in that insult, because it is the same contempt they feel when they turn on the news and see ministers laughing, MPs dodging questions, and technocrats promising a green future, while the present is gray and frozen. This is no longer about politics, but about dignity. The British people are not naturally rebellious. They are disciplined, patient, orderly. But when the government turns loyalty into weakness and patriotism into a joke, even the quietest citizens rise up. And that is exactly what is happening now, on the cold streets of London. Data released by official bodies and confirmed by independent economists paints a picture of a country in both energy and moral collapse. In just 2 years, the number of households in fuel poverty has jumped from 8% to 14%. That means 4 million families spending more than 10% of their income just to stay warm, and still going cold. Among pensioners, the tragedy is even crueler. 1 in 4 admits to rationing heating to survive. And while the population falls ill, the government celebrates emissions targets and organizes international summits to the applause of the global elite. Doctors report a 30% increase in hospital admissions for cold-related illnesses. Last winter, according to local investigations, lives were lost that could have been saved with a simple political decision. But the government preferred the applause of Brussels to the gratitude of its own people. It is this choice between the citizen and international prestige that outrages the nation. England, once a symbol of sovereignty, now obeys agendas not born on British soil. Before continuing, pause for a moment and think. If you want to follow every new twist in this scandal and receive the next revelations directly, unfiltered, and unmanipulated, now is the time. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This shows you stand with the truth, with those who refuse to be silenced by power, and helps me continue to bring you behind-the-scenes insights, documents, and analyses that the mainstream media tries to hide. Because what happens in the next few hours could change the fate of the kingdom, and you will want to be here when it does. And it is at this point that the revolt ceases to be merely social and becomes deeply political. 3 Labour MPs, according to reports in the press, have broken their silence and called for an urgent review of energy policy. In other words, they are feeling the heat from the streets. Among the Conservatives, the rhetoric is beginning to shift. Veteran MP, until now a staunch defender of environmental targets, publicly declared, "You cannot save the planet by destroying those who live on it." This phrase has swept the country like thunder. Talk shows, local newspapers, and even BBC commentators, once so cautious, have begun to admit the government has lost its grip. Meanwhile, a video recorded by protesters shows a symbolic scene. An elderly man trembling with cold outside the iron gates of number 10, holding up a lit candle and saying, "This is all the warmth left in this country." The image went viral. The flame of that candle, solitary and fragile, has become the symbol of a nation that still resists, but is on the brink of moral collapse. In the corridors of power, the response so far has been silence, and that silence is costing dear. Starmer hides behind generic statements, avoiding interviews, postponing speeches, pretending the chaos on the streets is mere political noise. But the streets have noticed. The leader who promised to listen to the people has become the symbol of a deaf government. According to labor sources, Downing Street's communications team is divided. Some argue he should apologize. Others believe facing the crowd would be too dangerous. But the real danger is different. It is letting the people believe their prime minister is afraid of them. And that impression has already spread. The public, especially the elderly, who have lived through crises and wars but never felt so disrespected, now see Starmer as a man out of touch with reality. A leader who trades truth for theater and empathy for spreadsheets. Trust, like warmth, once lost, is almost impossible to rekindle. There is a detail few have noticed, but which explains the scale of this rupture. The British people are not asking for luxury. They are asking for justice. There are no party flags waving in the streets. There are bills, invoices, and tears. There are no rehearsed speeches. There are real stories. The baker from Leeds who closed his doors after 3 generations. The teacher from Bristol who teaches in gloves because the school's heating was turned off. The war veteran in Portsmouth who receives medals in summer and cold in winter. Different faces, but the same expression: exhaustion. And the government, instead of listening, responds with technicalities, targets, and reports. The people do not want numbers. They want respect. And this is where Starmer's mistake becomes fatal. He treated a moral revolt as if it were an Excel spreadsheet. He ignored the symbolic power of collective pain. He underestimated British patience, which is long, but not infinite. And when a restrained people decide to speak, there is no party, no police, no iron gate that can silence them. This is precisely why, at this stage of the crisis, many analysts are already talking about institutional rupture on the horizon. There are rumors that members of Starmer's own team are considering mass resignations if the Prime Minister does not take responsibility. An advisor, according to reports from independent outlets, is said to have remarked that the Prime Minister is living in a bubble, convinced the people will tire before he does. But this reading is dangerous, because what is seen on the streets is the opposite. The people are more united than ever. Britons who would never march together, conservatives, Labour, libertarians, nationalists, now share the same protest space. Different flags, but the same pain. The anger has transcended ideology. The Metropolitan Police itself has admitted to being overwhelmed and fears the coming week will be unpredictable. In Downing Street, curtains drawn. In Parliament, whispers. And in the air, a growing sense that something bigger is about to happen, something that could redefine the very course of British democracy. But before continuing, an important pause. If you want to follow every twist and receive the next revelations firsthand, subscribe now and leave a like. This shows you stand with unfiltered information and helps me bring new data and behind-the-scenes insights in the coming hours. What is happening is not ordinary news. It is a turning point, and the next few hours could decide whether the United Kingdom awakens or collapses. At this point, even international observers have begun to sound the alarm. In Brussels, EU diplomats are monitoring the crisis with apprehension, fearing that British instability could reignite debates over sovereignty and borders. In Washington, analysts describe the moment as a slow-motion collapse of legitimacy. In Ottawa and Canberra, Commonwealth members express solidarity with the British people, emphasizing that the voice of the streets cannot be ignored. The world watches, perplexed, as the cradle of parliamentary democracy seems to crumble under the weight of political arrogance. And in the midst of this storm, the figure of the king returns to prominence. Sources close to the crown say Charles is following events with deep sorrow, and that no modern monarch has faced such a dangerous chasm between the people and the government. It is the ultimate symbol of what is at stake: the British soul, divided between tradition and a government that seems to have forgotten what it means to serve. And so we reach the decisive point. The broken promise that began as an echo has become a thunderclap. The people are not asking for a miracle. They are demanding truth. The frozen streets have become moral courts, and the verdict is clear. The government has betrayed the pact of trust. On one side, a prime minister isolated behind walls and reports. On the other, millions of Britons united by cold, by anger, and by the memory of a country that was once an example of courage and honor. What happens next will define the future of the kingdom. Either Starmer descends the steps of power to listen to those who elected him, or he will see his leadership crumble under the weight of his own indifference. Britain is patient, but not eternal. And tonight, in every lit candle, in every hoarse voice, in every gaze turned towards the closed windows of Downing Street, a message resounds, strong, clear, and impossible to ignore. Hear us now, before it is too late. Because what happened today changes everything, and history, as always, will be written not by the powerful, but by those who refuse to remain silent.